Most people think they're on track for retirement until they try to leave work and realize they're nowhere close. And it's not just about how much you've saved. In reality, retirement success depends a lot more than on just your 401k balance. In fact, I've seen a lot of people with over $1 million saved still struggle simply because they missed key steps that should have been handled while they were still working. So in today's video, I'm going to show you the 9 retirement goals that can make or break your future and why falling behind on even one of them can blow up your entire plan. And these aren't just nice to haves, they're the foundation of a secure retirement. And if you're behind right now, I'm going to show you exactly how to catch up before it's too late. So let's get into the video. You know, most people assume that if they've saved diligently and paid off their house and stayed invested, that they're on track for retirement. But I think the truth is that a lot of high earners and diligent savers still find themselves unprepared for retirement. And, you know, it's not just because they didn't work hard or save enough, but it's because they missed these key steps in the planning process that just don't show up on a 401k statement. And so I'm talking about things like relying too heavily on tax-deferred accounts and ending up with a tax time bomb at age 73 when you have to start taking required minimum distributions. It could be, you know, retiring with plenty of assets, but you don't have a clear strategy for generating consistent income. It might be delaying long-term care planning until coverage becomes way too expensive or even unavailable. Other things that I see derail otherwise good plans would be not having a bridge strategy for health insurance before Medicare. I literally just got off the phone with somebody today, and you know, if they retire early, it's going to cost them $2,000 a month to stay on their employer coverage. So it's a big issue. Something else I often find is that having incomplete estate documents or outdated beneficiary designations can be a big problem. And finally, I would say ignoring the psychological shift that comes from, you know, going from earning and achieving to slowing down and spending. It's a big one, and a lot of people simply aren't prepared. In fact, studies show that nearly half of retirees risk outliving their savings, even those with significant portfolios. And so, you know, that honestly is pretty alarming. So, you know, it's not just about how much you saved, it's about how well you've prepared. Most traditional retirement plans are going to focus on one thing, and that's accumulation. But, you know, as you approach retirement, the game is going to completely change for you. You move from building wealth to protecting it, distributing it efficiently, and, you know, hopefully enjoying it with a purpose, especially if you are well prepared. And so that's why these 9 goals matter. They cover the full range of retirement readiness, financial, legal, healthcare, and emotional. And when all 9 are in place, you're not just ready to retire, you're ready to, I would argue, thrive in retirement. Now let's start by covering the first 3 financial goals every future retiree needs to hit while they're still working. So goal number 1, and that is create a flexible withdrawal strategy. It's definitely not enough to know how much you have. You definitely need to know how you'll access it. And one of the most common mistakes I see is having plenty of retirement savings, but no clear distribution strategy. And the issue is that without a plan, people are going to withdraw inefficiently. You're probably going to pay unnecessary taxes, and you'll take on more market risk than you realize. So, you know, a proper withdrawal strategy is going to balance your taxable, tax-deferred, and Roth assets. It will help you adjust based on market conditions, and it's going to provide you with reliable income while protecting your long-term growth, which I think is critical to have that reliable income. And so this is an area where you could do something like a bucket strategy where you allocate assets by time horizon so that hopefully you'll never have to sell stocks in a downturn just to fund your living expenses. But there are actually all kinds of strategies you can use to help create this. Goal number 2, build real liquidity. A lot of retirees have a high net worth, but what they don't have is usable cash. I tend to find this a lot with the real estate people. And look, I'm not bashing, real estate in general. It can be a very nice investment asset. But for these people, it's like the answer for everything. And then they approach retirement, and it's nice they have income coming in, but they have like no liquid assets and they get themselves in trouble. And that can be a real issue, especially for something unexpected. I'll give you another example of something I literally am dealing with now. I've got a new client and, considerable net worth. Literally almost all of it is in pre-tax retirement accounts. She's got a little bit in a Roth, and she bought a new house this year, and she didn't have the cash on hand to go out and pay for the down payment. So guess what? She has to take a more than $100,000 distribution from an IRA. And luckily she's over 59 and a half, so she didn't end up, paying the extra penalty, but she's already making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. And then you add another $100,000 of taxable income. And so, with proper planning, maybe several years ahead of this, she could have avoided that situation by having that cash on hand, right? So this is a big deal, and I would suggest starting now, especially if you've got like 5 years or so before your retirement, you need to think about how you're going to access liquidity. Goal number 3, optimize tax location and catch-up contributions. So if you're over 50, the IRS gives you a gift, and that's called catch-up contributions, and how you use that gift matters. And one nice aspect about this is that if you have an employer plan, get to choose usually between a Roth contribution or a regular pre-tax contribution. And so knowing where to put those catch-up contributions can really make a big difference as you're coming into your final years before retirement. And something else I'd mention on the whole, optimizing tax location is that you need to be very strategic about where you actually place your investments. Here's something I did a plan for somebody not that long ago, and you're quite wealthy, and they've done a great job of a lot of things. But when I went through their accounts, and they had Roths and they had IRAs, and they've been doing Roth contributions, great job with all of that, but their assets were located in very suboptimal areas. In fact, both of them had almost 80% cash in their Roth IRAs, which there's very seldom ever a reason to do that, because usually, and it's going to depend on your plan, you're going to be withdrawing from your Roth last. And so you tend to want to have growth there. And it's easy to demonstrate mathematically if you structure how your investments are placed in different accounts, how this leads to way more efficiency over your lifetime and less taxes. And so something else you need to be thoughtful of now before you actually retire. Okay, and now, if you want help determining whether or not you're on track with these goals, and now that you've seen some of these critical retirement goals, and if you're wondering if you're on track with your own goals, you can just click the link in the description below where you can fill out a questionnaire, and I'll send you a personalized video analyzing your specific retirement readiness, and I'll help show you how close you are to any preparation gaps before leaving the workforce. And now back to the video. Goal number 4, finalize your long-term care strategy. So long-term care is one of these expenses that most people don't plan for, and it is definitely the one that can wreck everything else. It might be cognitive decline. That's really a big one. It could be a fall, or just, the natural effects of aging. But the reality is most retirees are eventually going to need help with basic daily living activities. It's simply a fact. And it's not covered by Medicare. So there are different ways to approach this. You don't have to buy long-term care insurance, though you should consider it. But you definitely do need a strategy, right? So a traditional long-term care policy, I would look into that while you're still insurable. These days, I definitely favor something called a hybrid policy, and that blends life insurance and long-term care. I'm not an insurance guy. I don't peddle this stuff, but you always have to be open to looking at different solutions. And I think this is a pretty good one because you'll have a cash value for what you paid in. And then there's also the long-term care component, which in my experience usually is multiples of what the cash value is. For example, I mean, literally just when I looked at $100,000 cash value that they paid in premiums over several years, the lifetime value, if anything were to happen, just immediately out the gate, it was like $350,000 in long-term care benefits. And then there's an inflation rider for that to grow. And if you never use the long-term care, you're still going to have the cash value of the premiums there. And that's what makes it different than a lot of other, just a regular long-term care policy. So something worth checking out. You could also have a self-funding approach where you earmark specific assets for a health spending fund. I like this solution. Leaves you with more control. So that's something to consider too. Typically, that works better for people that have a lot of assets. They're obviously in a better position for most things, and here, self-insurance might make the most sense for them. But the key is deciding before you retire while you still have options. Okay, goal number 5, bridge the health insurance gap before Medicare. If you plan to retire before 65, you need a concrete plan to bridge the health insurance gap. And this is one of the most overlooked risks that I see, even among high earners. And look, without a plan, you could face like $1,500 to $2,000 a month premium. So I literally just had a call with somebody this morning, and they were telling me that their employer, for both of them, it would cost them about $2,000. So, that's a lot of money, guys. And so you need to think about, what are the other alternatives to this? Maybe it's COBRA. Maybe your spouse has a plan. You might even, or it might be an ACA marketplace plan. And this is where advanced planning comes in, because if you retire well before Medicare, you're going to have to take care of this. And with a good withdrawal strategy in place, you can kind of manage your taxable income, and you can stay within the thresholds to get a credit for the ACA premiums. And you would likely pay far less than $1,500 to $2,000 a month. Now, you want to debate the coverage and all of that. So, these things matter too. But once again, far better to model out these costs now, not the month that you retire. Okay, goal number 6, reassess life and disability coverage. Insurance is great, and it's there to mitigate the risk that something happens to you. But remember, you're paying a cost for that. And remember why you got insurance in the first place. So, for most younger people, I'm always going to encourage them, get a term life policy until you have significant savings, because if somebody dies, you want to be able to, have that savings in place because of the foregone income and whatnot. But as you're getting older and you're in your 50s, if you've already kind of achieved those goals, maybe you don't need the insurance anymore. So it's something that you need to reassess. I'm not necessarily saying you would want to get rid of it, but some people kind of, they might have had very expensive whole life or universal life policies, and they're paying a lot in premiums. And maybe they just don't need that, because you could just buy term insurance and only, pay a very small fraction of what you're paying for whole life, and you could separate the investment. So once again, you want to do this before you're actually retired, right? Review your existing life insurance. Do you still need it? If so, is it enough? I mean, maybe you don't have enough coverage and maybe you need more, right? And here's the other thing to think about. If you do, in fact, need more, many term policies end right around the retirement age. And so once you're out of the workforce, new coverage is going to be tough to qualify for. And if you do, it's going to be pretty expensive. And it rarely makes sense to buy. And so while you've got a little bit of a runway here, the time to get extra coverage might be now. All right, goal number 7, finalize your estate plan. You don't need to be ultra wealthy to need estate planning. In fact, the more you've saved, the more you have to lose by not having this buttoned up. And before you retire, you need to, at a minimum, make sure you have a will that reflects your current wishes. You got to have powers of attorney for both healthcare and finances. You don't want to leave your loved ones in a position where they're just guessing what your wishes are. Depending on your situation, you need a revocable living trust. That way you avoid probate and ensure privacy and just, really ensure a smooth transition for your assets. Some estate planners argue everybody with any assets needs one. One of my best friends is a estate attorney. He's always telling me that. It's about protection. I don't know if I necessarily believe that, but even modest wealth, I do agree having a trust in place really does make a lot of sense. And the final thing I would say on this is, estate planning isn't just a one-time event. You got to review it every few years and after, any major life change, just to make sure that everything still aligns with your goals. All right, goal number 8, test drive your retirement budget. So retirement spending feels very different from pre-retirement budgeting. It's very tough for people to transition into this. And I think one great way to know if you're really ready is to just test it. You may want to start living off your projected retirement income while you're still working and use only what your retirement plan would generate. Social security, pension, withdrawals, rental income, etc. So hopefully the trial run is going to help you identify hidden expenses. The big one would be it's going to reveal whether your expectations match reality. And also, hopefully it'll give you a little bit of time to adjust without the pressure of living on a fixed income. I'd say a lot of people discover that they underestimate healthcare and travel and gifting, or just, the cost of filling their time while they're no longer working. And it's definitely better to find out now than after it's too late to pivot. All right, our final goal, goal number 9, create your retirement purpose plan. This might be the most overlooked goal of all, but I'm going to say it has one of the biggest impacts on your happiness. So, people focus so much on how to retire and they forget to ask what they're retiring to. What are you going to do every day? Who are you going to spend your time with? What gives you purpose when work no longer does? This is a big deal, guys. A lot of people kind of get their sense of worth through what they do. And if you take that away, people tend to be lost. So whether it's volunteering, consulting part-time, traveling, spending time with family, or it could even be picking up a new skill, right? But you need to have a purpose plan, not just a portfolio. And so I try to get people to think through, what does a day in retirement look like, your typical day, and then we can kind of work backwards from there to build your financial plan. All right, and look, you might be thinking, well, I haven't done most of this. I've saved money, but I haven't really built a retirement strategy. And that's okay, right? You're not alone. And you're not too late. And so now we're going to go into how do you fast track your progress even if you are coming in behind schedule. And so step number 1, prioritize the goals that carry the most risk. Not all gaps are equal. And so you want to focus first on the areas that can cause the most damage if they're unaddressed. So I would say for most people, this is going to be finalizing a long-term care strategy because, healthcare costs are going to spike with age. You want to create a health insurance plan before Medicare. The next one I would say is make sure your estate documents are in order, especially your powers of attorney, but definitely make sure that all of your beneficiary designations are right as well. You're going to make it easier on your heirs if heaven forbid something happens. And so, look, I know these aren't glamorous tasks, but they're the ones that matter the most if something unexpected happens. All right, step number 2, I'd say sequence your strategy for efficiency. So you don't have to do all 9 goals at once, but start with the foundational ones that unlock progress on the others. So the sequence that I might look to do would be something like get clear on your income and withdrawal strategy. Then you want to build liquidity so you're not forced to sell during downturns. And, you can do other things like paying for a home down payment or paying for health insurance premiums so that you don't have to take the money out of your IRA to pay for those and be forced to pay more taxes and so on. Then the next step I would say would be tackle insurance and legal gaps. Then I would go on to mapping out your purpose and testing out your budget. But hopefully if you don't try to do everything at once, you won't get overwhelmed and, kind of succumb to decision fatigue. All right, step 3, accelerate progress by controlling what you can. Time is valuable, but I would say control is more valuable. So here's how you can speed things up. So number 1, cut expenses in your final working years to boost savings fast. Number 2, I would say reallocate your portfolio for better risk-adjusted returns, not necessarily chasing growth. And again, you want to make sure that you've got the right allocation as you're coming into retirement several years before, so you don't all of a sudden, go into an emergency situation that you weren't prepared for. I've seen it time and time again, guys, right? A surprising number of retirees can make more progress in the final, 3 to 5 years of working than they did in the entire decade before, just by being intentional. All right, step number 4, create an accountability system. Plenty of studies show this. You're more likely to succeed when you track progress and have someone to push you forward. So, this might be as simple as a checklist, quarterly review, or working with a financial planner. I know I'm biased, but, it does serve that purpose, right? But yeah, anything that helps you so you're not just relying on memory or good intentions. You really need to build a system to keep you moving. And look, you wouldn't run a business without proper metrics, and I would say don't run your retirement plan like that either. Okay, step number 5, adjust the timeline if needed. Sometimes the best move might be, look, you got to work for 2 more years, and that way you can retire with confidence. And this might, give you a little bit of breathing room. It can reduce sequence of return risk. It will lower your future withdrawal rates. And it's going to buy you time for more Roth conversions, tax diversification, or even, legacy planning. All right, so some final thoughts here. Now, look, guys, if you're behind, don't panic. You're not starting from zero, I hope, anyway. It's never too late to start and, go in, do the things that you get the biggest bang for the buck first, and just go step by step. And look, if you're thinking, okay, well, how do I turn these 9 goals into a plan that actually works? For me, click the link in the description below. Like I said earlier, you can fill out a short form and I'll personally send you a customized video showing you exactly where you stand and what I think the focus should be next to make sure that you're truly ready for retirement. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.